The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Sunday, November 9th. I hope everybody is having a good weekend. And you ready for another episode of the Yaron Brook Show? All right. We're going to talk about anti-Semitism today. That's the topic of the show. I figured we talked about it a lot yesterday, and it's come up a number of different shows in the past few weeks. We might as well just wrap it all up with one show dedicated to this topic. I'll answer any questions about it, any issues, anything else you have. We can cover it all in one go. I'll cover some of the comments I got on Twitter for the various things I posted. We'll do the history, kind of try to define it. We'll talk about Zionism, anti-Zionism. I mean, there's a lot to cover. In this one, but we'll try to kind of have this definitive show, from my perspective at least, with regard to anti-Semitism, so that later I can refer people. Oh, you want to hear my views on anti-Semitism? Go watch that show. Although I fear that this is a topic that I'm going to have to deal with over and over again in the years and maybe decades to come. But certainly in the years to come, decades. It's a long time. Anyway, the years to come. So this is at least a one anchor I'm putting down with regard to this topic, but it is going to be sad that we're going to be talking about this for a long time. Let's see. Michael's already started us off with some super chats. He did promise that today I would achieve my goal easily because he has so many questions. So Michael's getting us started, and I expect him to fill up the screen with lots of questions. But you too can ask questions about anything. It would be great if we got a bunch of questions related to this. But as you know, I take questions on everything and anything. They get answered. In the first, based on how much money you put up, that is the above $20 questions get ranked based on the amount of money and then answered, and all the under $20 basically get answered in the order in which they are asked. So don't worry, I answer all the questions. I respond to everything. I read out all the comments. If you want to insult me, one way to get me to read out your insult is to put it into a super chat. Also, I wanted to just remind you, show tomorrow, probably in the evening, and then Tuesday from California, and then no show Wednesday, Thursday, and hopefully a show Friday from Colorado, and then no show Saturday, Sunday, a week from today, a show back from home. All right. I just got a comment on Twitter that's just too funny to ignore. So let me just say, I said something about that, a video of Tucker talking about the demons scratching him and stuff. And I said, this guy's nuts and crazy. And this is the response I got. Demons are and were accepted by just about every culture throughout history. And decent people tend to avoid the personal attacks, whereas warmongers and Israel worshippers seem to thrive on them. All right, demons are not accepted by any culture of reason. A culture of reason rejects demons and thinks that people who believe in demons are little nuts. And particularly if they live in the 21st century, which is a century built on a foundation of an age of reason called the Enlightenment, where demons were not taken seriously. And the idea that in the 21st century in America, in spite of all the secularization, in spite of all the reason, in spite of all the science, in spite of everything else, anybody who claims to be attacked by demons and didn't document, they didn't take pictures of the scratches, and admit to having 4 dogs in the bed with them at the time, has to be called a kook. And that's exactly what they are. And anybody who defends demons and the existence of demons and the presence of demons in our lives and the ability of demons to attack you during your sleep, even though you got 4 dogs protecting you, is another kook. And personal attacks. This is not a personal attack. It's a personal evaluation. It is a moral, a state of mind evaluation of me. In my view, Tucker Carlson, for a variety of reasons, is a kook, is a nutcase. He's lost contact with reality. He's lost contact with any kind of truth. He is in the category of nutty, above and beyond his immorality and his immorality and his advocacy for many evil ideas. The guy's just nuts. He's just crazy. And you want to take the craziness seriously? Go for it. Embrace it. Go all out. But I do attack people personally when they are, or not attack. I evaluate people personally. And if they behave like kooks, I call them kooks. If they advocate for evil ideas, I call them evil. Particularly if they're adults and there's reason to believe that they should know better than the evil ideas that they hold. I believe in moral evaluation and generally evaluating people, and I will make those evaluations public to the extent that they are public figures. If they're a private figure and there's a kook who's my neighbor, I'm not going to make it public. But if they're out there telling stories about demons scratching themselves, then they're begging to be called a nut. And with all due respect to all of you who love Tucker Carlson and view him as a demagogue, Tucker Carlson is nuts. All right, let's talk about another nutty set of ideas, and that set of ideas is anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is, of course, a pretty ancient set of ideas. It is not new. We'll talk about the history of it. We'll go back to where it started. This, of course, will not be a comprehensive, thorough analysis of anti-Semitism. That would take a massive book, and I do intend to do some work on this, present it as a lecture and things like that. But for now, this is going to be my take on the phenomena. So first, let's talk about what it is. What is anti-Semitism? I mean, here's a definition. Anti-Semitism is hatred, discrimination, prejudice, hostility, or violence against Jews as Jews. It includes the belief in a whole variety of conspiracy theories that view Jews as somehow, having extraordinary power over people's lives and over the world in which we live. Now, part of the question is, and I think an important part is, who are Jews? What are Jews? What is Jew? What does this refer to? What does Jew refer to? And I think it refers to a few things, and it doesn't refer to these as separate, but all as one. Bob, if you have questions, the super chat is available. Happy to answer all of your questions. Jew refers to the religion. It refers to a culture. It refers to a particular ethnic group, and it refers to a perception of the existence of a nation, and a Jewish nation. Jew refers to all of those, and members who belong to any one of those, people who practice the religion, people who have and it refers to genes, to a genetic heritage, whether people refer to other people as Jewish, even when Jews don't refer to them as Jewish. So, for example, according to Judaism, you can only be a Jew unless you convert, but you can only be a Jew if your mother was Jewish. If your father's Jewish and your mother's not Jewish, you're not Jewish. And yet, again, I think people refer to Jews, if anybody related to them was Jewish at some point. And here's the important part about Jew in the context of anti-Semitism. I mean, a lot of people refer to themselves as Jewish because they are religious, or because they view themselves as part of a nation that they define as Jewish, which is pretty amorphous, or because they are collectivists and view themselves as somehow belonging to other people through some kind of genetic relationship. I don't consider myself a Jew in day-to-day life. It has no relevance to me. I'm not religious. I'm not religious. I'm an atheist. It culturally, I'm sure the Jewish culture had an impact on me and my life, but I've chosen a different culture. Most of my friends today are not Jewish. The culture in which I live is not a Jewish culture. Genetically, I'm certainly a Jew, but I don't know what that means. That means nothing. You're not, who you are is not your genes. Who you are is what you make of yourself. It's the choices you make in your life. So in that sense, I don't consider myself Jewish. I don't celebrate any of the Jewish holidays. So that's religion out, culture's out. I just don't think of myself as belonging to I don't believe in race. I don't believe in the concept of race, and even the concept of ethnicity is kind of a anti-concept. What does it actually mean? Particularly if you detach it from the issue of race. So. To me, I am not a Jew, except that the anti-Semites, those who hate Jews, clearly define me as such. That is, I know that when they start rounding up the Jews, however they want to define it, I will be one of the people being rounded up. When people express anti-Semitic views, they are pointing their finger at me. My own views about Judaism or being Jewish are irrelevant to the very fact that the anti-Semite has his own definition of who a Jew is. I mean, Hitler, what was it? 2 generations, if you had anybody, any of your grandparents was Jewish, you are a Jew. It didn't matter whether you considered yourself one or not. One of the things that led Herzl, the founder of the Zionist movement, to found the Zionist movement is the realization that the haters of the Jew, the anti-Semites, would never let Jews assimilate. He was a completely assimilated Jew. He didn't consider himself a Jew, Herzl, until he faced the Dreyfus trial and realized that as assimilated as you get, the anti-Semites will always, always, always view you as a Jew. Bob doesn't like Jews, but he also says, we don't like libertarians either. Well, that's good, because I'm not a libertarian, so there we go. I'm not Jewish and I'm not a libertarian. Do you love me now, Bob? Do you like me now? The haters have come. At least, Bob represents them. I don't know how many else there are available. All right, so anti-Semitism is a hatred, discrimination, prejudice, hostility, violence against Jews. It is the advocacy and the embrace of conspiracy theories related to the Jews, and we'll talk about those. It is characterized by stories of primarily of Jews doing horrible things that then justify the hatred, prejudice, and violence against them. Right? If Jews are really killers, if Jews really do drink the blood of whatever, then violence against them is justified. Right? So anti-Semitism not only has this hatred and violence and prejudice, but it also builds up the stories. It builds up the theories. It builds up the justification for that violence. And I think you can only understand the stories about Israel the lying about Israel, the constant lies about Israel, in the context of they need to constantly rationalize their hatred. They need to constantly justify their hatred, their prejudice, and ultimately what they want is the violence against the Jew. And they will make up stories. Blood libels go back to the very early, Christianity, and really to the beginning of Christianity. We'll get to the original blood libel in a minute. But blood libel, the idea that Jews kill this, do that, they're responsible for blood, that kind of blood libel is always used as justification. Let's go slaughter the Jews. Let's go kill the Jews. Let's discriminate against the Jews. So you need a story. They control the world. They make money off of exploiting Christians. They make money off of usurious interest or whatever. All of this is the case. Cook says blood libel started in England. No, it didn't. It actually starts way before that. If we understand what blood libel really is, we'll see that it starts really way before that. So, this is the essence of anti-Semitism. It's the hatred that is then justified by conspiracy theories. And look, the original conspiracy theory and the original blood libel, the original conspiracy and the original blood libel, and the justification for much of the hatred of Jews and the discrimination against them and the violence against them by Christians in the period of the early church all the way through the Middle Ages and through the Crusades is the conspiracy and the blood libel that the Jews, not a Jew, not a group of Jews, but the Jews, were responsible for the death of Christ. That is, the idea that Jesus was killed by the Jew. That is, that theologically, you blame Jesus' death on the Jew, becomes really the first blood libel and becomes the first great conspiracy theory that justifies hatred. I mean, if Jesus was the Messiah and Jesus was the superhero in Jordan Peterson's terms, and Jesus was God's son, whatever the hell that means, and God himself, whatever the hell that means, and the Jews killed him, well, that's bad. And remember that he was crucified. So it wasn't just any death. It was a particularly brutal, horrible, painful, excruciating death. And the Jews are responsible. So this is really where it starts. Now, you could argue that there's certain passages in the New Testament that already are suggestive of kind of a very negative attitude towards Jews, and certainly it's the way it's been interpreted. It's certainly the way it's been interpreted, and whether I'm sure there are other interpretations that are not anti-Semitic, but certainly certain elements within the church have used these interpretations. For example, in John 8:44, you are your father, the devil, which has been interpreted to mean Jews were collectively guilty for rejecting and killing Christ, and they are basically the devil, and they were created by the devil, and they are the devil. Right? But really, anti-Semitism really takes off with certain figures in the early church, and then we'll see it gets institutionalized in the Middle Ages and just thrives from there. So we're going to just go. I'm going to read you some passages just to give you a sense of the extent to which early Christians, at least some leading figures among early Christians. I do not want to say that all early Christians believe this, but certain figures among early Christianity were viewed the Jews as really horrific, really evil, really bad, and that the source of that was the fact that they were responsible for the death. And again, let me note, I've noted this in other contexts, but what they do is they shift, right? Because we know who was responsible for Jesus' death, and that was the Roman Empire, or Roman authorities. But it very quickly, certainly from the rise of Constantine on, it becomes very politically not very good, very politically bad to blame the Roman Empire, because Rome now becomes Christian. Rome are the good guys. The Romans are the ones spreading Christianity all over Europe. So you can't blame Rome for this attack on Jesus. You've got to find somebody else. And he's right there. And he's the Jews identified very early on as the killers of Christ. So it's easy to do. It's easy to do. Before we do this, before we talk about some of the early Christian commentators, let me one more point I want to make, and that is that people have in the comment section keep saying to me, no, Christians didn't invent anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism existed before that. Lots of people hated the Jews. For example, the Egyptians enslaved the Jews. That's the beginning of anti-Semitism. But that's silly, right? I mean, the Egyptians enslaved the Jews. They enslaved lots of different people. They didn't enslave the Jews because they were Jews. They enslaved the Jews because they were foreigners who came to Egypt and didn't have a home, and it was easy to enslave them. It was more politics, geopolitics of the time, right? Jews were people without really a home at that point, and the Egyptians just used the opportunity to enslave them. And people were enslaved all over the Middle East at that point in time. Slavery was just part of life. It was even Jews had slaves later on in the Old Testament. So, and people fought wars, and people hated each other, but there wasn't a theme here. We hate Jews, qua Jews. We hate those people because we'd like to pillage and take their stuff, and we'd like to conquer their land. That is not the same as anti-Semitism. Not the same as anti-Semitism. Right? So that is... So I do consider the beginning of anti-Semitism, really the beginning of anti-Semitism, really the first Christians to articulate the case for hatred of Jews. And then Christianity dominates the West, and it becomes the fountainhead of all anti-Semitism, secular and religious, including much of Muslim anti-Semitism, probably to a large extent originates, particularly the modern form of it, originates with Christianity. Justin, the martyr, 155 CE, in the Common Era, in a dialogue, says, "The tribulations were justly imposed on you, i.e. Jews, for you have slain the just one, Jesus, and his prophets before him, and now you reject those who hope in him." So here's the basic Christian claim. Jews killed Jesus. Again, collective guilt, even if, now all of his disciples were Jews. He was a Jew. Many of his disciples were Jews. I mean, everybody, or most people in that part of the world at the time were Jewish. But it's collective guilt. It's all Jews killed Jesus. Even Jews that come generations after Jesus was killed Jesus, or share the blame in the killing of Jesus. But here's the more subtle reason why they're hated. Jews at the time of Jesus, and then repeatedly over the decades, centuries, really millennia, couple of millennia, Jews have had the opportunity to see the light. Jesus was among them. Christians surround them. They could convert to Christianity at any point in time. They can become Christians, and the Christians will embrace them if they become Christians, at least up to a point, as the Inquisition in Spain showed, not completely. But they claim that they would embrace them. And yet the Jews resist, or resisted. They didn't embrace Christianity. You reject those who hope in him. They don't become Christian. And that's what really makes them evil. That's what really justifies discrimination and hatred and sometimes violence against them. It's the not willing to recognize Jesus as the Messiah. They're responsible for his death, collective guilt over millennia, and they won't convert to Christianity, or they won't become Christians. John I can't pronounce his name. Chry Sostom, 386 CE. I mean, he was particularly vicious. This guy really hated Jews. Again, one of the fathers of the church, one of the early great thinkers of the church. He did 8 homilies delivered in Antioch. Among the most explicitly anti-Semitic, there was a lot of anti-Semitism there, but among the most explicit anti-Semitic works is this one. I mean, the whole thing is probably, if not one of the most anti-Semitic works produced by a Christian. The synagogue is worse than a brothel. It is the den of scoundrels and the repair of wild beasts, a place of meeting for the assassins of Christ. There it is again, assassins of Christ, right? Through the generations. Every generation is responsible for. Again, I hate the synagogue precisely because it has the law and the prophets. It is the dwelling of demons. Remember demons? Maybe it was Jews that scratched the Tucker Carlson. Maybe it was them. So John was particularly bad. Particularly bad. You can read. I mean, you can find lots of other stuff. Let me see. Once again, I had here. I mean, 340 CE. This is Saint Ambrose. Saint Ambrose is considered one of the great thinkers of early Christianity. I mean, he was the bishop of Milan. He was the bishop to the emperor, who was in Rome, but the empire often was ruled out of Milan. So he was the most influential, one of the most influential, Christians, theologians, leaders of his time. He wrote extensively. He is again considered one of the fathers of the church. And here is his quote about Jews. Right. This is he was born in 340. This is 379. So this is all the 4th century. Remember, this is after Christianity has now become the religion of the Roman Empire. Bob, I don't have a Bronx accent. Never lived in the Bronx. Never lived anywhere near the Bronx. Quote. I mean, Bob is such an idiot. Quote, the most worthless of all men. That's Jews. They are lecherous, greedy, raptious. They are perfidious, murderers of Christ. They worship the devil. Their religion is a sickness. The Jews are the odious assassins of Christ. And for killing God, there is no expiation possible, no indulgence or pardon. Christians may never cease vengeance, and the Jew must live in servitude forever. God always hated the Jews. It is essential that all Christians hate them. Whoa. I mean, it doesn't get much more explicit than that. Now he goes on and on. I mean, some Christians burned down a synagogue, and the emperor comes in and he says, no, you must rebuild it for them. You must compensate them and rebuild it. I mean, the Roman Empire has often, wanted religious pluralism and didn't want to discriminate. And Ambrose goes to the Pope, to the emperor, and says, absolutely not. Should not build a temple. Remember this the next time you see one of these scoundrels somewhere spouting Jewish hatred. Ambrose said, God always hated the Jews. It is essential, not optional, it is essential that all Christians hate them. What's his name, Fuentes and Tucker Carlson, all these guys, and Candace Owens, all they're doing is doing what Ambrose said all Christians should do. Hillary, again, fourth century, Jews are perverse people accursed by God forever. Gregory of Nicaea, again, one of the great thinkers of the early Christian church, the Jews are a brood of vipers, haters of goodness. The Jews are a brood of vipers, haters of goodness. That's from Nicaea. And again, another one from Saint Jerome, of course, the saint. If you call it a synagogue, a brothel, a den of vice, the devil's refuge, Satan's fortress, a place to deprave the soul, an abyss of every conceivable disaster, whatever you will, you are still saying less than it deserves. And you can see how Fuentes and Tucker Carlson are kind of mild in their anti-Semitism as compared to these early Christians. And you can see how, the Christian world later on, much later on, can easily come up with the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. You can see how they can claim the Jews control everything. I mean, this is pretty bad. This is pretty bad. So this is the early church. I will say Augustine, maybe the most influential of all the early church fathers, is the most influential of all the church fathers, and one of the two, primary thinkers in Christianity, Augustine and Thomas Aquinas. Augustine, again, late 4th century, early 5th century, is generally less violent towards the Jews. He's not an advocate of violence. But his attitude, nonetheless, is this. The Jews, by their own scriptures, are a testimony to our truth. They bear the mark of Cain, living as wanderers, so that they, by their dispersion, they may be witnesses to us. In other words, the reason Jews exist, and the whole point of having Jews out there, is that they witness the success, they witness the grandeur, they witness the greatness of Christianity. They are witnesses. Their whole purpose of being. And of course, from the perspective of the Christian, Jewish suffering, Jewish dispersion, the minority status of Jews, is a reminder to all Christians that their misery, their poverty, is a reminder to all Christians of the proof of Christianity. You can see now, in some sense, why when Jews become rich, strong, able, when Jews establish their own state, that this is an affront to Augustinian theology. No longer are the Jews witnesses to Christianity's success. The Jews are successful. But that's a perversion and distortion to the Augustinians. I mean, for the Augustinians, and this is at least for a millennium, but I think it still has influence to this day. Jews were to be preserved in misery. This partially explains the creation of the Jewish ghettos as proof of Christianity's truth. And if that is true, if that statement is true, then when Jews are not in misery, when Jews are rich, successful, prosperous, and maybe even having their own state, what does that say about Christianity's truth? So some of the elements that build up towards modern anti-Semitism. The Fourth Lateran Council, this is now 1215, it's quite a bit later. In some provinces, a difference in dress distinguishes the Jews or Saracens from Christians. We decree that such Jews and Saracens of both sexes in every Christian province and at all times shall be distinguished from other people by the character of their dress. So this is the beginning of kind of a gold star that the Nazis embraced afterwards. We want to be able to tell who's Jewish and who's not by what they wear. Now, 1215, of course, reminds one also of the Crusades, and let's remember the Crusades were a great opportunity for Christians to express their hatred of Jews through incredible acts of violence. I'm just looking for some of the material I have on this. 1 second. Unfortunately, I didn't organize this. Where is it? All right, doesn't matter, because it's, I know this stuff. The First Crusade, the Crusades, again, military campaigns that were launched by Western Christendom, originally to liberate Holy Lands from Muslims. They also called the Crusades the attacks in the Spanish Peninsula, the Iberian Peninsula, on the Muslims. They also in Spain. They also called Crusades the attempts by the Christians, successful attempts by the Christians, to Christianize the Northern Europe and in particular Scandinavia, the conversion of the pagans to Christianity by the sword, I might ask, were also considered Crusades. But anyway, in the Crusades, the First Crusade, the idea was that we had to go, and the Christians had to go to fight the infidel, and to fight the infidel and to liberate the Holy Land. The whole point was fighting the infidels. The idea was to set out the holy. This is Pope Urban II, announcing the First Crusade. Let those who have hitherto been robbers now become soldiers of Christ. Set out for the holy spectre, Jerusalem. Rescue that land from the wicked race and subject it to yourself. Right? Now, this is aimed at Muslims. That is the wicked race that he intends. But you can see how, well, there's another wicked race here in Europe amongst us. Why should we go all the way over there to the Middle East? It's far away. It's a trek, right? In 1095, it's a trek to get there. So, what about the wicked race that's among us? What about the wicked race that's right here in front of us? And indeed, they use this to basically, aggress or slaughter the Jews on the way. Now, it's worth mentioning that the Pope did not intend this, and the Pope spoke out against the killing of the Jews during the Crusade. The Pope did not support it. The Pope rejected it and actually argued against it. But he was not on the ground. By the time he heard about it, it was too late, and it didn't stop anybody. There were enough religious authorities that supported this that he was just ignored. Here's a German cleric describing what happened in Germany, in the area of Mainz, in northwest Germany, as this rabble of robbers and others, guided by preachers and holy men, traversed through Germany on their way south to the Holy Land. The people, inflamed by a new spirit, said, "Why go to fight the enemies of Christ in distant lands, while the Jews, whose father killed him, dwell among us in peace?" They slew them spared neither age nor sex. Hundreds of Jews and whole communities were wiped out. They were given the option of converting to Christianity. Some chose suicide, but most were just slaughtered when they refused to convert to Christianity. And this is well documented by people at the time, and thousands again of Jews were killed in Germany as part of the First Crusade. Of course, when the Christians actually got to Jerusalem, they didn't differentiate between Jews and Christians who were living there, Jews and Muslims who were living there. And indeed, the Jews, here's a quote from William of Tyre, who writes a history of the First Crusade. The Jews who had dwelt in Jerusalem were burned alive in their synagogue, which was set on fire by our men, crying out, "Christ is our Lord." This is the history of Christianity. This is, whoops, what happened to my, all right, there we go. This is the history of Christianity. This is, how it progressed. Of course, it doesn't stop there because you have constant blood libel against Jews. You have constant blaming the Jews for the problems that the Christian world is encountering. For example, just to add, just to give you a sense of this, right? That was the First Crusade. Second Crusade, you get Saint Bernard of Clairvaux condemns the attack, but says the Jews are not to be persecuted, killed, or exiled. They are for us as a living sign. And yet, Jews are killed throughout the Rhineland. Again, nobody's listening to him. The killings occur regardless. In the Third Crusade, 1189 to 1182, anti-Jewish riots in England occur during Richard I's coronation. They then occur at York in 1190, where much of the Jewish community is destroyed. Now, part of that has to do with usury and Jewish usurers, and who are bankers basically lending money at interest, and this is where they take the opportunity to burn all the books of the bankers so that they don't have to pay their debts back. And the Fourth Crusade, it continues basically on, and then you get the blood libels, which are always associated with these pogroms of Jews. You get Norwich in 1144, you get Trent in 1475. And then during the Black Death, right, the Black Death that is wiping out huge numbers of Europeans, huge numbers of Europeans. You get that the Jews are responsible for the Black Death. They are poisoning the wells, and the Black Death is the consequence of the well poisoning. And that is why Christians are dying. And of course, the consequence of that are, again, mass killing of Jews throughout this period. Jews are then, later on in European history, Jews are then isolated in ghettos in the major cities. So that they can still live in the city, but they're all in one quarter, usually very, 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 very crammed into a corner where their living standards are horrific. And again, they serve as witness to what happens to a people who don't accept Christ, and witness to the Christian success. And Christians' power over them. So this is very much a part of Christianity. Really, until the 1960s and 1970s, where the Catholic Church makes efforts to apologize to some extent, their complicity with the Holocaust, and for the history, a long history of anti-Semitism. They acknowledge it, and they somewhat apologize for it, although arguably they've never properly taken full responsibility for it. But there's no question that anti-Semitism has its origins, has its roots deep into in Christianity, and this is not uniquely Catholic. When Luther rebels against the Catholic Church and start basically the Protestantism, I can't say that word, right? He rails against the Jews. He is one of the most anti-Semitic thinkers that Christianity has produced, and he shapes much of the attitude towards Jews within the Protestant religion. And remember, Luther is in Germany. German anti-Semitism, it was not invented in the 20th century. It has its roots going back to the early church, but it certainly has its roots going back to Luther and in the 16th century. It's interesting. He starts out kind of rejecting the idea that the Jews are to blame for Christ's death. He writes, "We ought to treat the Jews kindly and deal with them in a friendly way if we want them to become Christians," right? So we want them to become Christians. And he reminds his readers that Jesus was born a Jew. But over time, he really changes, and he writes a number of different essays, that basically attack the Jews. They don't reform. They don't join the Protestant movement because he blames the fact that Jews didn't become Christian. Well, it's because the Catholics were corrupt. So he's between 1538 and 1543. He starts producing more venomous works. So on the Jews and their lies, 1543. We'll get to that in a minute. Of the unknowable name and the generations of Christ, on the last words of David against the Sabbatarians, that's the Jews, the Sabbath. So he's writing extensively about the evil of the Jews because they're not converting to his new religion. On the Jews and their lies, 1543, which is 65,000 words, just has the whole litany of accusations against the Jews that Christianity has developed over the decades. Just to give you a few of the citations, this is Luther. Right? The Jews are base, whoring people, full of the devil's feces. Their synagogues are incorrigible whore, an evil slut. He continues on another passage. They are nothing but thieves and robbers who daily eat no morsel and wear no thread of clothing which they have not stolen from us. This is primarily in the context of usury. Usury is theft, according to Christianity. Usury is a mortal sin. The Jew with the bag of gold around his neck is in the seventh running of hell with the gold dragging down into the fire. Jews are usurers, and the Christians hate them for that. He then writes, their synagogues should be set on fire and their schools destroyed. So Luther's actually calling for violence against Jews in 1543. This is what he proposes for rulers in Protestant nations. This is what they should do. They should burn synagogues and schools. They destroy Jewish homes. They should confiscate prayer books and Talmuds. They should forbid rabbis to teach. They prohibit safe travel. They should force Jews into manual labor expulsion. And he framed these acts as Christian duties. They would actually save souls and protect society from Jewish blasphemy. And his theological reasons for this: Jews refused to accept Christ as proof of divine rejection. Jews were instruments of Satan, keeping Christians from truth. And, you know, the idea of the apocalyptic, during the apocalypse, there would be a final conversion of the Jews to Christians, or they all go to hell, which, you know, Christians still believe to this day, right? Now, luckily, it's rare the Jewish rulers actually acted on his recommendations. I think too many of them needed the Jewish moneylenders to fund many of their wars. But again, this is Luther. This is not some second-rate, unknown nobody out there preaching. This is the founder of the Protestant religion. And this circulated thoroughly. And by the way, you know, the Nazis mined the 1543 essay for juicy bits. You know, they reprinted excerpts. One of them was you know, what Luther said about the Jews, which was a pamphlet. After Kristallnacht, Lutheran Bishop Martin Sass published a pamphlet celebrating that the synagogue burnt on Luther's birthday. And Hitler himself mentioned Luther approvingly in speeches as a great reformer. I mean, Luther's authority, in a sense, gave kind of the modern anti-Semites a theological pedigree, a theological excuse for what they believed in. So, you know, in other words, at the end of the day, anti-Semitism, again, has its roots deep into Christian theology. Christianity has basically perpetrated anti-Semitism through the last couple of millennia. Particularly, I'd say, up until the you know, the 18th century, it was primarily a feature of Christianity. So when one wonders where does anti-Semitism, hatred of Jews come from, it comes from the father of the church, the fathers of the church. It comes from Augustine. It comes from Ambrose of Milan. It comes from Luther. It comes from popes and bishops and theologians who wrote extensively about this, about the hatred of Jews and the legitimacy of violence against them for almost 2,000 years. And the sin is the collective guilt of killing Christ. The sin is that they will not convert to Christianity. This is, you know, when you have two mystical religions, and Judaism is mystical, just as mystical as Christianity, but when you have two mystical religions, how do you prove one is better than the other? Well, you can't. So you just have to declare one better than the other. And particularly if you're in a position of power, i.e. Christian in this at this point, then the fact that you know, the other party doesn't recognize that you are the truth and they are not is a sign of their depravity. That is the evil of mysticism and religiosity, and you know, the subjectivism that it implies, because there is no truth there. There's just their subjective emotions. Now, if you add to that the economic argument against the Jews, which I've talked about and written about extensively elsewhere, so I'm not going to cover it here. We're already approaching an hour. And that is the fact that Jews were usurers, that they were successful, that they made money. You can see why people are hostile towards them, because they're making money. They're doing something that the Christian considered a mortal sin. They're lending money. They're making money off the loans of the Christian. How dare they? They're inferior. They were wicked people, and yet they're making money off of us. You can see how this just exacerbates everything. By the way, one of the reasons, just as an aside, one of the reasons there are so many Jews in Eastern Europe, or were so many Jews, I should say, were so many Jews in Eastern Europe before Hitler managed to kill most of them. One of the reasons for that is that Western Europe became so poisonous, so anti-Jewish, so anti-Semitic, that they just couldn't stay there. And indeed, there were kings in Poland and Lithuania and the Baltics who were, who needed population, who needed people to come and populate the area, who were willing to tolerate the Jews, willing to be positive about the Jews. And as a consequence, the Jews moved there for their own safety. And for a long time, Eastern Europe was relatively safe for Jews until certainly the 19th century, things flipped and Eastern Europe became, again, a land of pogroms. Now, let's move quickly into the 19th century. And the world is becoming secularized, and yet anti-Semitism is still alive and well. And now it shifts. There's a shift from primarily religious explanations of anti-Semitism and to dominantly economic and nationalistic. Now, the economic anti-Semitism is primarily expressed, beyond the accusation of usury. It's primarily expressed by Karl Marx. Now, again, if you're interested in the relationship between anti-capitalism, between Karl Marx and anti-Semitism, I have a number of lectures on this online. You can find it. Just put Yaron Brook, Antisemitism, Anti-Capitalism, and you will find the lectures. So I'm not going to belabor them here, but I'll just say that Marx has an essay, his first published essay, which is highly recommended that you read. It is an essay that basically, it's called On the Jewish Question, that basically declares that Jews, the problem with the Jews is they're self-interested, they're capitalists, and capitalism is evil, self-interest is evil, and therefore Jews are evil. And that the problem with Christianity, the problem with Europe of the 19th century is that Europe is adopting Judaism in a sense that it's adopting capitalism, and that Judaism has to be, in a sense, eliminated, and first from Christianity and then from Jews themselves. It is a scathing anti-Semitic essay, which, again, you can find on Marx.org, I think. Just put Karl Marx on the Jewish question, and you will find it. It's quite striking. The second thing that happens during the 19th century is you get a rise of nationalism. Nationalism is a phenomena of the 19th century. You get nationalistic revolutions. People start defining themselves in terms of tribal, but in terms of a collection of tribes rather than tribal city or tribal very small locations. Now it's a collection of tribes, and now it's called the nation. So suddenly you get this creation of nations. You get the creation of Germany. You get the creation of Italy. You get the creation of the Czech, what today is the Czech Republic, and Slovakia, and all these become nations. They were never nations before. They were part of empires, and you belonged to a particular tribe within the empire. But now the idea was to liberate the nation from the empire. And they rebelled against the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They rebelled against, or in Italy and in Germany, it is a process of uniting city-states or disparate provinces that each have autonomy or each have independence. And now what you see is a consolidation of power in the creative nations. And then the question is, in all these new nations that are being created, is what is the place of the Jew here? And by the way, this is part of the Jewish question that Karl Marx is trying to answer, because what's going on is during this period, Jews have now, some of them have assimilated into the culture of the place and the time, right? So specific time and place, And they were gaining civil rights in places like France and even Germany, Austria, and others. And yet it wasn't clear how they belonged, because they weren't part of the tribes that made up each of these nations, and they were the original globalists, right? And they were even called at the time cosmopolitans, right? It's a code word for Jew. Marx was not a Jew. Marx was a Christian. Marx was raised a Christian, and his father had converted from Judaism to Christianity and raised Marx as a Christian. Marx grew up in an environment of Christians hating Jews and absorbed that environment. He had Jewish relatives, but he was a baptized Christian. So Marx was not a Jew. But during this period of nationalism, where do you put the Jew? How do you refer to a Jew? They can't assimilate into us. They can't become German or French or Austrian, because they're not. Because what defines German, French, Austrian is genes. Is genes. And the Jew has different genes. It comes from a different lineage. Notice collectivism. Once you have collectivism and tribalism, well, the one who doesn't belong to your tribe or your collective, well, how do you categorize him? What do you do with him? How do you treat him? I mean, Romantic nationalism, coming out of Germany, defined the nation as ethnic bloodline. And the Jews were outsiders. They were outsiders. And of course, just like what was done in Christianity, every problem that was created, every problem that happened was blamed on the outsider. And the convenient outsider was the Jew among us. Not only, and now, of course, the Jew was also successful in the 19th century, or at least some Jews were. The assimilated Jews certainly were. And now it was easy to go after them. They were no longer the witnesses of Christianity. Now they were successful, which was horrific to the Christian. They were not part of the nation. They were an outsider, and therefore, you know how right now Tucker Carlson and others are accusing Jews of having more than one allegiance. They don't have their allegiance to America. They have joint citizenship. They have allegiance to some other cause, and therefore you can't trust them, right? This is not new. This is not new. Jews during the 19th century and early 20th century were constantly accused of not having allegiance to the state in which they lived. I mean, this is the whole argument against Dreyfus. Dreyfus was a French senior officer in the French army accused of spying. Clearly false accusations, motivated by anti-Semitism. He was completely assimilated, motivated by anti-Semitism. And the whole point that was being made is, well, he's a Jew, so he can't really be a Frenchman. So how can we really trust him to be committed to the French interest? Because he's a Jew. He's of a different nation. He's not part of our nation. He can pretend. He can speak French. He can be part of our culture. He can go to our concerts. He can sing our songs. But he'll never be French, because French is in the blood. Dreyfus, this is Dreyfus. So this idea of dual loyalty is not new. It's just another one of those, accusations that have been thrown at Jews for hundreds of years. The Tucker's just re-airing, re-voicing. None of the anti-Semitism around today, the Nick Fuentes type, the Tucker Carlson type, is new. They're just rehashing old myths. Now, people like Bob, who is on the chat, believe something like, Well, if Jews have been accused of all these evils for 2,000 years, yeah, they didn't really kill Christ because the Romans did it. And yeah, all the stories of them poisoning whales, yeah, it turns out rats were the reason who actually caused the Black Death. And yeah, that idea of them drinking the blood of children, it turned out to be wrong. And it turned out that all of these, blood things, it turned out to be wrong. Yeah, but it can't all be wrong. I mean, God, people can't be wrong for 2,000 years about Jews. There must be something true behind it. There must be something that they've done. I mean, they were kicked out of England, and they were kicked out of Spain, and they were kicked out of all these places. So, I mean, it can't all be just false accusations. And yet it absolutely is. They were kicked out of Spain because they refused to convert to Christianity. They didn't do anything. They just refused to become Christian. And yet, every single one of the accusations made to them, about them, has turned out to be false and collectivistic garbage and tribalistic nonsense. Have there been bad Jews? Of course. Are there bad Christians? Of course. I mean, but collectivizing guilt? Disgusting, despicable, evil. So, what exactly? I am at fault because some Jew did something bad? Well, human beings do bad stuff. All people do bad stuff. But you collectivize the guilt? That is the worst kind of tribalism, the worst kind of irrationality, the worst kind of evil, Bob. Evil. Antisemitism is, Did one of Jesus' disciples betray him? Did that disciple happen to be Jewish? Probably, because I think most of them were Jews. And does that mean all Jews killed Christ? Of course not. I mean, that is so irrational, so illogical. But that's how a collectivistic, tribalistic mind works. So, we don't have time, but the made-up stories about Jews just continue. During the early 20th century, you get the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This is a book that was published by anti-Semites in Russia, near Odessa, which is today in Ukraine. Claiming to be a Jewish manifesto about the Jews' desire to take over the world, clearly written by Christians, not by Jews, and yet became the basis for pogroms all over Eastern Europe and Russia, and to this day is cited by people. And to this day, maybe they don't refer to the elders of Zion, but they refer to the Jews controlling the world. I mean, Fuentes does this all the time. The Jews controlling finance and therefore controlling the world. Of course, the fact that Jews were so successful in finance, the fact that they thrived under capitalism, not all Jews, some Jews, but because those some Jews thrived under capitalism, the socialists always hated them, the left hated them, and again, collectivized the guilt. The few who thrived under capitalism were Jews, and therefore all Jews were bad. And the Christians or the non-Jews who maybe didn't thrive under capitalism hated them, resented them, rejected them for being successful. They were the other. For decades, Wall Street in America was quite anti-Semitic. The traditional firms refused to accept Jews as partners in the investment banks. Jews had to create their own investment banks in order to compete, and ultimately, they did a better job. So, yes. In Ivy League universities in the United States in the early part of the 20th century had a quota for Jews, just like they, in the later part of the 20th century, had a quota for Asians. Again, anti-Semitism, country clubs wouldn't accept Jews in them. Certain companies wouldn't accept Jews, again, in senior positions in them. Anti-Semitism has been with us forever, and sadly, it appears is spiking again in the United States and in Europe, motivated both on left and right, and motivated to some extent at least by Muslims, by Islam's adoption of many of Christianity's anti-Semitic views, although the Quran is filled with hatred of Judaism and Jews. It's just that hatred has manifested itself in a much more violent way among Christians than among Muslims. All right. Just to summarize it, anti-Semitism is a consequence of viewing the world through the prism of collectivism. It is the consequence of viewing the world through the idea that your primary identity is determined by your bloodline. This is blood and soil collectivism. It's who your ancestors were that determines your worth or lack of it. And you benefit and you'll get blamed for what your ancestors did and what other members of your so-called tribe do today. Now, granted, Jews are guilty of this collectivism as well. They take pride in the achievement of Jews that they have no relation to. And, they engage in the same kind of collectivism in self-identifying. But with Jews, it's somewhat understandable because whether they engage in the idea of self-identifying as members of a collective or not, the rest of the world will brand them as such anyway. So Jews, sadly, we live in a world full of collectivists. Anti-Semitism, the hatred of Jews, is motivated by collective guilt, the hatred of the other, envy of their success, and a deeply rooted anti-Semitism within the Christian church, Catholic and Protestant. And it seems to rear its head whenever there is existential angst among the people. Whenever there are things happening that people cannot understand. Whenever there is challenges and problems. It's easy to blame the other. It's easy to blame the tribe over there, the people who are different, particularly if they're successful. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. Exactly what we're seeing today. We're seeing a rise in anti-Semitism on the left and on the right. Now, we will have to do another show because we've gone for so long already. We'll do another show on the relationship between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, anti-Israel, the relationship between those things, because that's important both to understand left-wing anti-Semitism and today right-wing anti-Semitism. They couch it very much in terms of anti-Israel. It's the same anti-Semitism as in the past. It's just couched differently. It's presented differently. And it's very similar left and right, and both are influenced by Christianity in the end. The left is much more influenced by Marx and by altruism, by explicit altruism in the form of intersectionality. The right is much more influenced explicitly by Christianity and by the stories of both are influenced by the stories of the elders of Zion, the conspiracy theory that Jews control the world. So we will get to that. That's kind of at the heart of Tucker's kind of anti-Semitism. It's this anti-Israel. But let me leave you with this. Israel is the ultimate symbol of, the awful Jew. Israel is successful. Israel is strong. And Israel is now a nation. Is now a nation. And of course, a nation that is, identifies as Jewish and is strong and powerful and successful and rich is a repudiation of the whole idea of the Jews kept miserable in order to be a testament for Christianity and to prove Christianity's value and truth. Maybe Christianity is not true if God is favoring the Jews right now. Particularly if Christians are feeling angst, if Christians are feeling insecure. Well, when Christians feel insecure, lash out at the strong Jews. Lash out at the successful Jews. The only antidote to anti-Semitism ultimately is individualism. It's to stop treating people as collectives. It's to stop treating people as members of tribes. It's to eradicate the idea of collective guilt. It's the idea of treating individuals based on the nature of their character. Now, look, telling you about Christianity and its history of anti-Semitism does not mean that every Christian is an anti-Semite. Of course not. Indeed, many Christians are not anti-Semites. Many Christians saved Jews during the Holocaust. But the Catholic Church didn't behave itself particularly well, at least the Pope didn't during the Holocaust. Again, I'm not a collectivist. I'm saying the ideology as articulated by the leaders of the church has been anti-Semitic and has contributed to anti-Semitism. But I don't blame Germans today for what Germany did in the past. I don't blame Christians today for what Christianity did in the past. I'm just saying this is the influence. This is the influence. And you cannot understand Tucker. You cannot understand Nick Fuentes. You cannot understand the anti-Semitism of globalized Intifada without understanding the history, without understanding its source, without understanding the last 2,000 years of Christian ideology, the Christian ideology of Jew hatred. It is not to condemn every Christian. All right, I am way behind. All right, we did an hour and 20 minutes. I didn't think it would be that long, and we didn't cover everything I wanted to cover, so we will do the kind of Israel and anti-Semitism and Zionism on another show. All right, let's switch to answering your Super Chat questions. As Michael promised, we have had no problem so far in reaching our goals. You guys have been incredibly generous. I think Michael has been leading the pack in terms of being generous. Thank you, Michael, asking a lot of questions and putting real money behind those questions. So we will start with $50 questions. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. Then we'll go to the $20 questions, and then we'll do the rest. We are still $100 short of my third hour goal, so please consider continuing to support the show. You can do with stickers. We've got a lot of questions, so stickers are great right now because questions I have. All right, let me thank Thought Criminal. Thank you for the sticker. Let me thank Stephen Harper. And a lot of questions, less stickers, mostly questions. This is great. Catherine, thank you. And let's see, who else do we have here? Ta-da-dum. We're only $89 short of our $750 goal. Stephen, thank you. I know I saw Honing earlier. Catherine again. And I know I saw Jonathan Honing. Thank you, Jonathan, with 2 stickers. And thank you, Roland. Really appreciate it, guys. Thank you. All right, let's jump in with questions. And let's start with Michael, who's asked, I think, most of the questions here. But let's start with Michael's $50 question. He says, MAGA and Mamdani won because voters are saying if you don't fix our life economically, we're going to get radical politically. We need a significant shift towards capitalism or we're going to get configurations of National Socialism. Yes, I think that's absolutely right. Mamdani won because people are unhappy with the state of the economy. They're unhappy with the cost of living, inflation, in other words, or price inflation. They're unhappy with the cost of housing. And what you see is what you don't see is anybody coming up with solutions that are consistent and is willing to argue passionately for them. There's very little you can do as mayor of New York to reduce the cost of living when it comes to groceries and things like that. So Mamdani can pretend that he can, so Mamdani offers, what Mamdani does is he offers fantasies. You can pretend that by starting a government-run grocery store, you can lower the cost of groceries, but that is just a fantasy. Socialists generally propose fantasies to solve economic problems. You can pretend that price controls, rent control, can lower rent. And that seems to a zero-sum mentality person reasonable. Most people don't know economics. They don't know that rent control never works. And who is going to go out there and tell them? I mean, Cuomo, who's a Democrat, who's a little less socialist than Mamdani, but not really that much. What you need is somebody to come out and say, yes, cost of living is way too high. What we need is to crush inflation, price inflation, and you do that by getting rid of the Fed and by privatizing money. And what about housing? Well, you do that by privatizing housing, getting rid of zoning and getting rid of all these restrictions and taking years and years and years to get a permit to build, and height restrictions and parking restrictions and the millions of restrictions that inhibit construction. Make construction great again. Build, build, build. That's how you lower the price of housing. There's demand. People want to live in New York in spite of how some of you think how awful it is to live there. People want to live in New York. What they need is more housing. You need to have greater supply. That'll lower housing. It's economics 101. Somebody needs to advocate that, not mildly, moderately, but passionately. And that indeed price controls, rent controls, will only make things worse, not better. But for that, you need some understanding of economics. You need to have passion around freedom and free markets, and you need to be willing to go on TV and advocate for that and advocate for it passionately, consistently. And we don't have a political figure willing to do that. I mean, Milei in Argentina is about it, but nobody in the United States that I know of or I've seen running for political office has been willing to go all out on economic liberty, on economic freedom. But that's what's needed. We need capitalism, because the alternative to capitalism is socialism or fascism. And what we're likely to get is alternating. You know, the socialists will win. It'll be a disaster. And the response to that will be a fascist response, and I'm not sure there'll be election after that. But you get some fascism and then some socialism, and maybe some moderate will come in the middle and make things a little better for a little while, but not too much, and then you'll get back to that. So you just keep going in the same path. Same path. So, truly, we need some passionate, consistent advocates of liberty and freedom and free markets. And we're not getting them. Not getting them. Certainly the right is not producing them. And the left, you can't even pretend could produce them. So we're just not getting them. Andrew, of course there are some bad Jews. But in general, Jews are a highly productive and peaceful group. Anti-Semitism is based on a highly inaccurate judgment. I'm against collective judgment, but if one is going to do it, at least come close to the truth. Yeah, but again, it's a success that inspires the anti-Semitism. If they weren't successful, particularly in modern times, there'd be less anti-Semitism against them. Remember, Augustine relishes the fact that they're unsuccessful, wants to keep them unsuccessful because they become a testament to Christianity's success. Now they are successful. Well, now we really need to hate them. We need to make them unsuccessful by knocking them down a few notches. So I don't think these people don't assess Jews as successful or even as productive. But that creates envy, and that creates resentment for a variety of different reasons. And they're hated in spite of that, or because of that. So again, altruism demands that we hate the successful and the productive and the rich and the powerful economically. So, we hate Jews. And now they even have their own country. We certainly have to hate them. That's ridiculous. So yes, I don't think it's an issue of assessment. I think it's an issue of what you do with that assessment and how you interpret that assessment. All right, Michael, also $50. Thank you, Michael. Ben Shapiro had to cut ties with Candace Owens, Steven Crowder, and Tucker Carlson over anti-Semitism. I wouldn't be surprised if Matt Walsh is next. Doesn't he see the conservative movement he helped create is imploding in on him? I don't know what Ben Shapiro sees or doesn't see. I mean, again, he is a collectivist and he is a religionist, and I don't know. I think he's afraid at this point. I think he's worried. I think it is collapsing around him. How much he can recognize it, and how much he can clearly identify the causes of this and the problems with it, I don't know, because he can't reject the conservative movement's religious roots. He can't accuse them of he can't go after Christianity as the root cause of anti-Semitism, because that'll alienate all the other conservatives. He's not going to suddenly become a supporter of capitalism and of reason, because that's not who he is, not fully. So I get it. He supports the pro-Israel conservatives, and he is more rational than the rest. But he's in trouble, and this is not where the conservative movement is moving. And I think he knows that, and I think he is afraid. I think he's worried and afraid. And I mentioned this yesterday on the show. He has to worry about Matt Walsh and Knowles. He has to worry about them. There's every reason to believe that they are that they will bolt from the Daily Wire unless he's got them tied up in some way that they can't legally. But he's lost Candace Owens. He lost another woman. I can't to the Blaze. I mean, he's losing people. The Daily Wire can't just be him, although I'm sure he could have a very successful, podcast all by himself. But the Daily Wire is a whole infrastructure that has, massive costs, and those are not sustainable without a whole network. Yeah, he lost Brett Cooper. This incredible success that was the Daily Wire just a few years ago is in trouble. And I think Ben Shapiro knows that. He knows that. He doesn't belong. He doesn't belong partially because he's Jewish, but also partially because he's better than these other people. He's better than them on economic issues. He's been mildly better than them on Trump, although he sold his soul to some extent on Trump, and he knows that as well. He knows he sold his soul. So So Ben, I think, is not feeling too good about himself generally right now. I don't have any first-hand information. That's just my supposition. Shahzad says, I have heard that Superman is a Moses allegory. In the new movie, it is revealed that his parents sent him to Earth with a manifesto, unbespoken to him, which urged him to become the king of the planet and acquire a harem of concubines. That is bizarre. That is really, really, really weird. I assume he rejects that. That's part of the storyline, that he rejects that that assignment, that manifesto. Why is he a Moses? I mean, who is he leading out of slavery? I mean, isn't he just there to save the world from evil? And so I mean, Moses is like that. You know, I was called a Moses by Yoram Chazoni in our debate. He kept calling me Moses, trying to lead the individualists out of a collectivistic world. I took it as a compliment, I guess, coming from him. But I'm not sure he meant it as a compliment, but I took it as a compliment. Although Moses is a positive character for him, so he viewed me as kind of leading these individualists out. But he also viewed it as a inherently going to be unsuccessful. But yeah, I don't get the Moses is Superman analogy. Don't get it. I mean, Moses was born a Jew who was then raised within the Egyptian court, the king's court, but he was born a Jew. And the Pharaoh had decided to kill all firstborn Jews, so he was put in a little what do you call it, floating thing, and put on the Nile and discovered by the daughter of Pharaoh and raised within the courts. I'm not sure how even that is related to Superman. I guess that he's raised among human beings, but he's not from here. Yeah, not a good analogy. Anyway, Michael asks, does the mixed economy concentrate wealth in cities, so middle America ends up being screwed? Or are the people who gravitate towards cities smarter and have better values, so they create more wealth for themselves? No, I mean, again, you are assuming a zero-sum world. I really don't understand the argument. Cities are an immense value. Cities have the economic mass, they have the mass of talent, and they always thrive. They're a sign of civilization. But they don't come at the expense of Middle America. Middle America thrives in what Middle America is good at doing. It might be in agriculture, it might be in industry, it might be just in what do you call those people who live in the countryside and work in the city remotely? They might just be places that people want to live for lifestyle reasons, but yet they can benefit from modern technology and work anywhere. But there's no contradiction between the two. In a purely capitalist market, there's no zero sum here. The thriving in the cities only makes Middle America more prosperous, not less prosperous. And indeed, Middle America becomes poorer if the cities fail. I mean, cities are signs of civilization. Cities collapse are a sign of civilizational collapse. So it's not a sign of the mixed economy that wealth is concentrated in cities. And it's not true that wealth is concentrated in cities. Think of Warren Buffett living out in the middle of nowhere or think of the Koch brothers who are from Nebraska or Kansas, I can't remember. They all live in the middle of nowhere. So it's not even that concentrated. It's the reality is that cities will always be, under capitalism and everywhere else, richer, at least as a concentration of wealth, because they have the benefit of maximizing division of labor and specialization. And they have the benefits of economies of scale in labor. You can get more people working, but there's still rich people in the center of the country, and those people are better off, even the poor people in the center of the country are better off for the city's success than otherwise. So nobody is being screwed. Nobody is being screwed. Now, in a mixed economy that we have today, I don't know who's being screwed. Maybe the cities are being screwed, right? I mean, the middle America is full of farmers being subsidized by taxes paid by city folk. Industries are being kept alive through cronyism in all kinds of states because of cronyism. Military bases are kept alive and not closed when they need to be closed because of various levels of cronyism in parts of middle America. So it's not clear who's being screwed. If you think about the fact that middle America is subsidized, then in a mixed economy, somebody's paying to give them the subsidy. And who pays most of the taxes? It's the cities. It's the coasts. Most of the taxes are paid by California and New York and places like that. So in a mixed economy, everybody's being screwed. Everybody's being sacrificed to somebody. And, everybody's being screwed, for example, by inflation. So the distortions and perversions are everywhere. And everybody's being screwed by them. Everybody who lives in that country. Enric, thank you for the sticker. And I saw one of the sticker. Linda, thank you for the sticker. Really appreciate that. All right. So thank you, Michael. Another Michael. Same Michael, but another question. Part 1, Megyn Kelly is such a disappointment. She's afraid of going against Tucker and Candace Owens. Same with the head of the Heritage Foundation. I'll just comment on this. I don't understand why Megyn Kelly is a disappointment, because I don't understand what you expected of her. Megyn Kelly's always been a Fox. She was a Fox show host. She always followed the party line. When she went out on herself, she's a Trumpist. She mouths the what's expected of her. I mean, it's not like Megyn Kelly was some great journalist that's gone rotten. She was never very good. She was always like this. Part 2. This suggests that anti-Semites are no longer on the fringes of society. They have numbers, and mainstream conservatives outlets are taking notice. Yes, I think that's right. I think that's why it's such a problem. One second. Yeah, it's being mainstreamed. And these are leaders of the conservative movement. These are not fringe characters, unfortunately. Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, and they're succumbing to it because it's a powerful political force within conservatives. So is Heritage. Heritage is massive. It shows the fact that they're intellectually bankrupt. They're intellectually bankrupt. And that they have to appease a large base of people that have accepted these horrific ideas. Paul, can you give 3 examples in basic philosophical or political premises where the right and left agree? Well, it depends which right and which left, but, they both agree that individual rights need to be violated in order to satisfy something that they categorize as the public good or the common interest, or what's good for America, or what's good for the proletarian, or what's good for somebody. And right and left agree that rights are not inalienable. Rights can indeed be violated for the common good. They just define the common good differently in different circumstances. But the principle of rights can be violated. What else do they? Well, they agree, this is a manifestation of the fact that they fundamentally agree on collectivism. They both view collectivism as the standard. The right might view the collective as the nation, and the left might view the collective as the poor or the proletarian or the workers or something like that. But they both agree that the standard of value and the standard by which we should all behave is a collectivistic standard. It's a standard of the group, not the individual. And this relates, of course, to the fact that they don't believe in protecting individual rights. Jennifer says, my dad was a Jewish atheist. I grew up with the name Feldman and luckily never got any anti-Semitism. Maybe because I grew up in a wealthy neighborhood in Michigan. Is anti-Semitism worse in the South? Yes, I think it is worse in the South. It's also worse in places that don't have a lot of Jews or where they're not exposed to a lot of Jews. You know, the more Christian a place, the more anti-Semitism you're going to get, generally. And that's why I think you get more of it or got more of it in the South. I don't know about today. But it also depends on, all it takes is a couple of kids to express anti-Semitic views and other people join the little gang. So sometimes it's just an issue of the particular people that happen to be in your class or in your social group, whether you feel the anti-Semitism or not. Clark, doesn't it ever shock you how deep human hatred and irrationality can go? There's so many layers, and it builds up over time to create monsters. Seem like a complete waste of energy. Absolutely. I mean, it really is horrific. And it's unbelievably sad and pathetic, because think of that energy and that focus and that enthusiasm going towards productive activities, productive endeavors. Think about what could be made, the hate, the irrationality. Think about all those irrational people being rational. What kind of a beautiful, amazing world we would have. And yes, they build up to create monsters like real monsters like Hitler or you know, monsters on the communist side like Stalin and Mao, but even, you know, junior monsters, smaller monsters that just entrenched our mixed economy and refused to allow us to move towards greater freedom and greater prosperity. Monsters come in all sizes, in all types. So yes. Or the Nick Fuentes type monsters, the Tucker Carlson type monsters who waste our time, waste our energy, and waste so many people. I want to say mind, but do they have a mind? Waste the energy of so many people. Andrew, how do you explain that there's still immense man-made pain and suffering because of a belief in gods at the same time when science and technology is in an advanced state? Well, I think basically what religion provides people, and this is the hook, and then it gets its fangs into, its claws into us. It provides people with morality. So, and this is in an epistemology. So it tells people where the truth comes from. And yeah, you know, this is not truth about the natural world. That comes from science. But the truth primarily about morality. The battle is really about morality. And people don't know what to do without religion guiding their morality. So the consequence of that is that people embrace this primitive ideology because they view it as the only source of a moral code, the only source of how to be good, if you will. Right. All right. All right. Let's see. Andrew also says, what about Jewish people or any minority seeing themselves as victims? Jews have a claim of legitimate victimhood, or at least being maligned by nasty conspiracy theories. Still, isn't it bad to label oneself a victim? It is, unless you are a victim, right? I mean, so if somebody steals, if somebody burglarizes you, or somebody kidnaps you, and I don't know, puts you in a jail, or puts you in the dungeon, you're a victim. And you've got to label yourself, not label yourself as a victim as in I'm always a victim, but right now I'm a victim. And part of the reason if that happens is you need to know who to fight, how to fight, what to do to stop being a victim. But yeah, sometimes you're being victimized. So you have to acknowledge reality when it's really reality. and deal with it. Now, you're right in a sense that you can't internalize it. I've been victimized, therefore I'm always a victim. I am a victim. I should always be a victim. And yes, some Jews do that, and some Jews do that, and they live with that. But that's true of individuals. That's true of groups. You've got to face reality. You're a victim when you're a victim. You're not a victim when you're not a victim, and you have to deal with that. And you have to, when you are a victim, you have to get out of that situation as quickly as possible, and figure out how to never become a victim again. Talk about victim. I get this question. I've been getting this question for 40 years, right, from anti-Semites and haters generally. This is John Smith on the chat. Teach us about the USS Liberty. Now, volumes have been written about this. There's nothing new I'm going to say about this, but this talk about victim, right? This is the non-Jewish victimhood, the victimhood of anti-Semites. This is another blood libel. It's the same blood libel as the poisoning of wells. It's the same blood libel as the Jews killed Christ. It's the same blood libel as everything. Now, this was a U.S. Navy ship that was attacked by the Israeli Air Force in the lead up to the Six-Day War. And it clearly was an accident, and Israel's, it's been explained and analyzed and explained, and the conspiracy theories don't matter. The idea is that Israel did it on purpose. Now, let's even assume that that is true, that Israel did it on purpose. Okay, that was 60, that was almost 60 years ago. What relevance does it have to anything today? The people who did it are all dead. The people who did it are all dead. If you put that aside, Israel has been an amazing friend to the United States and pro-U.S. In a way that no other country in the world has been. What exactly is the problem? Let's assume they made a mistake. Let's assume they did it on purpose. Okay, go. Why are you continuously hopping on this? On the USS Liberty? It was almost 60 years ago. It's irrelevant. Anything going on today. It's irrelevant, it turns out, to the relationship between Israel and the United States. Certainly, everybody who investigated it, everybody in power in the United States who looked at it, decided that it was irrelevant. But Israel didn't kill them. It was a mistake. It was an error. You don't commit errors. Do you feel the same way about the Vietnamese? Do you know how many Vietnamese killed American servicemen? Do you hate the Vietnamese the same way you hate Israelis? No, you don't. The Germans killed tens, hundreds of thousands of Americans, World War I and II. Do you hate them as much? Many Americans, many Americans have been killed, servicemen and others have been killed by Palestinian terrorists and Arab terrorists over the years. Do you hate them? No. It's just pure victimhood, and a victim mentality, and it's just pure anti-Semitism. And it doesn't matter how many times what happened to the Liberty is explained to people, no matter how many people investigate it and come up with the same conclusion, it doesn't matter. The conspiracy will always be there. It is the poisoning of wells caused the Black Death. And facts don't matter. Reality doesn't matter. Truth doesn't matter. All that matters is the Jews did it. So you're just John Smith or whatever you call it. You're just an ugly anti-Semite. That's all you are. And look in the mirror. And that's what you should see. That's what you do see. All right, Hopper Campbell, let's go on. I don't think love by nature is stronger than hate. Hate seems to have won out. for most of human history and is unfortunately dominated today? Well, it depends what we mean by stronger. Love is what builds things. Love is what creates things. Love is what makes life possible. Love of values, love of self, love of the people you love. You don't get skyscrapers, you don't get automobiles, you don't get technology, you don't get iPhones without love. All hate can do is destroy. Now, what if we had more? Creation or destruction? Clearly creation. Clearly love is stronger than hate. Clearly love is more dominant than hate. Clearly the productive are winning in spite of everything. Now, they're not winning enough. Imagine a world in which love dominated and hate was gone. All of that. But no, I completely disagree with you. Hate is way too powerful. There's too much of it, and it's horrible because we could be so much more productive. But love ultimately dominates, and most people are much more loving than they are hating. John, thank you for the $5, and that was your 5th super chat, so I appreciate that. Andrew, I'm going fast because otherwise this will take all night. It was interesting to me. It was interesting to me that Rand wrote in her journal about Peterson that she makes collectivistic judgments, which is horrifying. But it's true collectivistic judgment is an extremely irrational way to judge an individual. But it's true. Collective judgment is an extremely irrational way to judge an individual. Yes. She wrote it about Isabel Patterson, that she makes collective judgments. And Ayn Rand thought it was horrifying. And yeah, collective judgments are horrifying. And they're particularly horrifying. When they are kind of negative collective judgments and they necessitate some negative action against whoever, right? Bobby, would ARI ever consider adding an addendum, the description of the first lecture of Objectivism through Induction, to reflect that Dr. Peikoff no longer holds that causality is volitionally induced? What? I don't know. I mean, I don't remember what he says in Objectivism through Induction in that first lecture. I'm not sure. And I'm not sure what Leonard would think about that, but certainly I can ask. See, I can't remember that first lecture. I organized it. I was there live, but I can't remember it, so I don't know what he actually says in that lecture. What is he? How does he think? If it's not causally induced, where does it come from? How do we know? How do we know it? Volitionally induced. It's induced but not volitionally. I see. I think that's right. Okay. We'd have to find a way. Do you know where he actually says that? And I can look into that. Andrew, it's normal for an objectivist to get the principles on deeper level over time as he learns the philosophy better and makes new observations. 20 years in, and I still get shocked at new integrations of the evil of altruism. Yeah, I think that's right. It's still. I mean, I don't know that I'm shocked, but I still make new integrations and still hear other people make new integrations. And some of them are new integrations that are really old, but some of them are new. And this is the beauty of, this is a philosophy that gives you the tool to constantly grow, to constantly see, to constantly integrate. It is the ultimate philosophy of integration. Hugh says, any thoughts on the new show Publius by Breaking Bad creator Vince Gilliam? It seems to have an explicitly individualistic versus collectivistic theme. I only watched the first episode, and it does. It's a little creepy, and it seems a little weird. It's weird. Let me see more of it, And we'll see if that is indeed the theme and what comes of that theme, how it develops. And it is sad, though. You'll notice one of the other sub-themes is that the collectivists are all happy. The blob, the group, the collective, it's all happy. It's all hopeful and happy and benevolent and nice and friendly. And the individualist who is not susceptible to this virus and is not being contaminated by it is a cynic, miserable. We'll see again how that develops. And that, I think that'll hold. I think the theme will be something like, it's better to be individualism entails misery, but that's better than happiness under the blob, under the collective, which is better than nothing, but that's not a good theme. I mean, I'm still waiting for the happy individualist to be projected in a movie. Stephen, hi, Yaron. I start a very demanding job tomorrow in immigration law. Whoa. What advice do you have for people starting high-stress jobs to boost productivity and actually impress their bosses? Well, don't start a job with the idea that you're going to impress your boss. Shouldn't be the goal, shouldn't be the purpose. You should enter a high-stress job with the idea that you want to do as good of a job as you can do. You want to be the best Stephen Katz that you can be. You want to be the best in immigration law that you can, that you're just going to do a good job and that you care about the job and you're going to, hopefully derive real satisfaction from doing that job well. It's not about impressing your boss. It's about impressing yourself. It's about doing a good job for you. Focus on you. Focus on doing the job because you love doing a good job, because you have pride. Focus on your pride. Screw your boss. Focus on your pride. And if you do that, and if you do a good job, your boss will be impressed, hopefully, if he's rational. But if you start with the second-hand assumption that your purpose is to impress your boss, things will go haywire. Because you'll start thinking about, not about doing a good job, but about what your boss wants. And that will not lead to good things. All right. Thank you for the $20 and $50 questions. Let's move on to our 10 and below questions and see how long it'll take to get through these. Michael, seeing Jews behind everything doesn't reveal the world, it reveals the rot in our mind. Yes. I mean, the anti-Semite who sees Jews behind everything, or the conspiracy theorists generally, and the conspiracy theories who are not anti-Semites, although the amount of overlap is pretty amazing. Basically, it's rot in their own mind. It's finding causality where there is none. It's integrating things that do not belong together. It's a failure of reason and rationality. And that, even if it's not caused by rot, develops a rotten brain. Matt, I hope your book will have a chapter on anti-Semitism. It will not. It will not. That maybe is a different book, or certainly a different essay, a different talk. Maybe it will become a book one day, but it won't be in the book on Christianity. It will not. Cook, speaking of demons, what's the quote? People who can convince you of absurdities can convince you to commit atrocities. That's true, and that's scary. That's scary. Because if Tucker Carlson can convince you of the insanity of his demons claim and things like that, then what is he going to demand of you? What is he going to convince you to do? Because at some point, his agenda will turn to doing. It will not always stay at I'm just asking questions. And that's scary, given the size of his audience. Liam says, does Christianity make populations dumb, hateful, and racist? Christianity taken seriously, consistently, at least as it was understood in the Middle Ages, yes. I mean, no science, no real progress, civilizational decay, hatefulness, hate of the Jew and hate of the other. Yeah, all part of that Christian world. Destruction of art, destruction of science, destruction of economic progress, destruction of money. That's all part of the Dark Ages. It's all part of a period in history where religion was taken seriously. It had to come out of that period only by discovering Aristotle, discovering Greek ideas, which starts happening in the 11th century, 12th century, really kicks off with Aquinas in the 13th century, and really gets integrated into society with the Renaissance. Andrew, no hates on autobiographies, but it says something positive about Rand's psychology. That when asked if she'd write her autobiography, she said no, it would bore her. She was no narcissist. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's right. Harper Campbell. I get a sense Nick Fuentes doesn't actually believe any of this. He's a master antagonizer and troll and found a way to make a lot of money by saying outrageous nonsense. No, I actually think he does believe it. I think he believes it. He tells the story of coming home from college and telling his parents how much he loves Hitler and the Holocaust didn't really happen and how they are shocked. I don't think he only did it to shock them. I think that was an added value. But and particularly if you start repeating it and saying it often enough, I think it becomes part of you. But given that he was just in college, yeah, I think he believes it, or at least to the extent that you can believe stuff like that. I think he believes it, and it's part of him. It's part of who he is now. He can't separate it out. He cannot separate. He's not just an entertainer. Michael, if Donald Trump ran for president in the 1980s, would he have gotten nowhere? Why was the country responding to the optimism of Reagan despite how miserable and cynical the 1970s were? Yeah, because I think the culture was a lot better in the 1980s, a lot better. I think the American sense of life still existed, the can-doism, and I think Americans were frustrated by the 70s. And they wanted something better, and they were looking for something better. They had a much, much better sense of life. I mean, you could argue that that sense of life had been nourished by Ayn Rand, and that so many Americans had read her. But beyond that, it just hadn't been corrupted by time quite as much. And it still had remnants of that 19th century or founding fathers kind of sense of what it meant to be an American. So no, Donald Trump would have been a complete flop in the 1980s. He would have never succeeded. Americans could see right through him, I think, during that period. They responded to optimism because that's who they were. That's what Americans were. And it's only, I don't think Donald Trump could have succeeded in the 90s and not even in the 2000s. Donald Trump is a post-9/11, post-financial crisis phenomenon. He's Americans giving up on being American. And that manifested itself in the response to 9/11 and in response to financial crisis, and there was nothing left by the time Donald Trump showed up. Jonathan, Ms. Rand did not generally speak of her Jewish heritage unless faced with anti-Semitism, yes, as with Isabel Patterson. As far as we know, the only time she talked about it, that she said was that she did not consider herself Jewish except when faced with anti-Semitism. And I have the same approach, I guess, not that I'm comparing myself to Rand. I don't think of myself as Jewish, quite Jewish, except when I faced anti-Semitism. And then suddenly, yeah, now I'm a Jew. What of it? It's like, I'm not a Zionist. I'm not a Zionist. Except when you get these anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist creeps. And then I'll defend Zionism. Right? God, I'm looking at my Twitter feed, and people are so delusional. They're so nuts, right? I posted all the quotes from the Christian fathers about Jews, and this guy says, "Ever notice how much the West has declined since we abandoned this view?" Really? I mean, the West was like at the bottom of the pit of hell when that view was held. It was poor. It was pathetic. The Muslims were better and more advanced than the West when the West held those views explicitly. What is he talking about? The West rose when it abandoned those views, when it embraced reason and science and secularism. People are ignorant. That my book will address. Okay, we're seeing a pincer movement right now. This is from James, against Jewish community from both left and right. It's a type of political formation to gain power. No, I don't think so. I don't think it's planned. I don't think it's that sophisticated. It's just, anti-Semitism rears its ugly head whenever irrationality is strong. And irrationality is strong on both left and right now. And that's why we're seeing the anti-Semitism. So, no, it's not some power grab. It's just a manifestation of the evil of both left and right now. And it's still not true that a majority of Americans hold this. Neither majority of Democrats or majority of Republicans don't buy into this garbage. James says, have you read Mein Kampf? Was there anything unique about Hitler's orientation towards anti-Semitism and how to gain power from the phenomena? I have not read Mein Kampf. I'm really not interested. I see no value in it. I mean, some people get value from it. If you're studying the period and you're studying Hitler and you really want to understand Hitler, I guess you need to read it. I've never read it and not really interested in it. And I don't think he has a unique perspective. His perspective is nationalistic, blaming the Jews for basically the failure of World War I and the failure of the German people to rise up to its full potential. And you blame the other. And that's historically consistent. There's nothing really that original there, other than the particular integration that he makes of the time and place. Not your average algorithm. Tucker Carlson acts as an ideological launderer of other people's evil. Yes, although he adds some spice to it all, right? Jacob, did the Jews even have free will in killing Jesus? It was prophetized, and Jesus didn't save himself at the Garden of Gethsemane. That is a deeply theological question that I have no answer to, right? I don't know. I don't know what that, I don't know. Once you accept God, the Jewish and Christian God, once you accept his existence as this kind of being and predetermination as part of the consequence of that, the whole thing the whole thing doesn't make any sense. None of it makes any sense, right? Not your average algorithm. An argument to be convincing requires someone entertaining it. Motivation is part of the persuasion puzzle. Many people aren't motivated to seek truth and level up. Well, many people don't know the tool, i.e. reason. They're not capable. They don't value reason. They don't elevate reason. They don't engage in reason. And therefore, they don't know how to seek truth, even if they wanted to. Reason is the only tool for truth. John says, this is in the chat, an old Russian proverb, the Jew will always tell you what happened to him, but he won't tell you why. I'm telling you why. Because of the irrationality, the collectivism, the nastiness of early Christianity, of nationalism, of collectivism, and tribalism. I'm telling you exactly why. That's why these bad things happened to the Jews. It's not because of anything the Jews did. Now, John, who's an anti-Semite, will never accept that. Michael, just like Trump's no longer afraid to be accused of violating the Constitution and acting like a dictator, the new right is not afraid of being called anti-Semitic and racist. That's right, because too many Americans, like John, already anti-Semitic and racist, and they're just capitalizing in on it. And I've told you that I think that Donald Trump, in his first term, opened the door to this. And in a sense, implicitly, wink, wink, embraced the alt-right and allowed the alt-right to grow and become dominant. Clark, do you see a time in the next 10 to 20 years when Islamists and Jews are rounded up in some capacity by the authorities and excluded from society or worse? I mean, maybe not 10, maybe 20 years in Europe, in certain parts of Europe. Yes, I do think that is a possibility, that Muslims will be rounded up, and I think Jews will be thrown in for good measure. Why not? So I do think that's possible in Europe, and I think it's why, it's not the main reason Jews are leaving Europe. They're leaving Europe primarily because of Muslims, but ultimately they'll also leave because of what non-Muslims are going to do. All right, Michael, how do emotions respond to hierarchy of values we've created? Well, I mean, they reinforce the hierarchy of values. Once you have a hierarchy of values, you start feeling towards the higher values more passionately than you do towards the lower values, if you completely integrate it. So it takes actual work. It doesn't happen instantaneously. The emotions follow the evaluation, and if it's integrated, ultimately your passions will correspond to the hierarchy of value. Hierarchy of value is not created by your passions, but your passions will adjust to it. All right, Liam says, even though Southeast Asian cultures may be more collectivistic than we are when it comes to duty and family, they don't have the same contempt for worldly things or the work that Europe has, because they aren't saturated with Christianity, which is why they'll eventually overtake us, and objectivism will rise there first. I mean, that is quite possible. I do think Asia has this huge advantage of not having Jesus on a cross constantly looking down at them and inflicting guilt on their earthly success. Catherine, such a sad topic for a Sunday, but very interesting. Well, but it's appropriate for a Sunday. This is instead of going to church. Part 1, could you have at least one objectivist anti-Trump rally? Maybe at the next No Kings protest. I'm not saying it will change the culture, but it helps grow confidence within our own movement. I don't understand why. By getting ourselves offline in an organized physical space while simultaneously increasing networks of trust amongst objectivists. Well, that's what OCON is for. But when you do that, you should strive to have a positive, not a negative. We shouldn't come together in order to fruitlessly demonstrate against Trump. We should come together to study positive ideas, to share positive values, to reflect on, on Ayn Rand's great achievements. So I just don't get the protest thing and what is appealing about it. Is the Trump phenomena and the mainstreaming of anti-Semitism a notification that the impact of the Enlightenment is fading? It's been able to hold us afloat, but now we see a real drop-off. Well, yes, it's slowly dropping off. It's been dropping off for 100 years. It's been in decline. We know that, and so this is to be expected. It is the impact of the Enlightenment that is fading. Reason and individualism are fading, and reason and individualism are the achievements of the Enlightenment. So, yeah. Michael, the Jewish conservatives seem to be better than Christians. Ben Shapiro and Mike Levine are orders of magnitude better than Tucker Carlson and Matt Walsh. Yes, Judaism, modern Judaism, modern secular Judaism, not the Judaism of the ultra-Orthodox, is a much healthier religion because it's much more this worldly than Christianity. And therefore, and I think Mark Levin is pretty secular. I don't think he's an atheist, but he's pretty secular. So I think they are better. I think Jewish conservatives generally are better than their Christian counterparts because, to the extent that they're religious, the modern version of that religion is a more this worldly religion than the Christian type. Harper Campbell, when Nazi Germany arose, there was America to stop it. If America dissolves into Nazism, there's no one to stop it. That's right. That's right. Let's hope it doesn't happen. But again, the ominous parallels very much predicted that it would happen. Andrew, is species pride valid? That is, when in awe of a great artwork or technological achievement, one can feel pride in being a member of the species that created that, or is that collectivistic? No, not in the sense that you relate to what made it possible and you see that in yourself. So you relate to your species because you see it, you see the capacity in yourself. So it's a pride in self. It's a pride in those attributes that you have as part of that species, but only if you choose to engage them. Lyron, thank you for the sticker. Really appreciate it. Who did more in the name of protecting individual rights for Americans? Charlie Cook or Dick Cheney? God, I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, I'd say Dick Cheney. Cheney was a congressman who was quite good. He was quite good on primarily on economic issues. He was not bad. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're both bad, right? I mean, Charlie Cook was bad, particularly towards the end. More and more Christian, more and more interventionist, less and less capitalist. Dick Cheney sent troops to Iraq for no reason. So both mixed bags. There's no way to rank them. Paul, is anti-Semitism an expression of altruism? I mean, I think on the left it is. That is, I do think that the leftists' intersectionality is a big driver of their anti-Semitism, and that's pure altruism. I've talked about it many times. I don't see it quite as much on the right. On the right, it's more motivated by hatred and Christian view of their own superiority. I like numbers. Are big city mayors a sign of where culture is? No, I mean, big city mayors have been Democrats for a long, long time. I mean, maybe yes, to the extent that the culture's been very left, much more left than the economy or other things. Yeah, in a sense it is. And most big city mayors are Democrats because the culture is dominantly Democratic. Productive people, educated people predominantly vote Democratic, sadly. Well, I mean, given the alternative of Republicans, it's not that hard to understand. Yeah, it's certainly an indication of where things are. Enric, why didn't Jews form their own kingdom elsewhere after dispersing by Romans in another favorable area? Was it their religious adherence to the land of Jerusalem or otherwise could have been better? There was a Jewish kingdom. There was a Jewish state in Central Asia, the Khazars, I think they were called, that lasted a while. I do not know the history of it. I don't know how it was formed and why it went away. But there was something there. But also, they were always a minority, with this exception, and they were always under the thumb of the majority that was around them, whether Muslims or Christians, so they never had the opportunity to form their own state, and they were always dispersed because the powers to be made sure that they were dispersed. Matt, some people I know who are mostly rational flirt with Atlas Shrugged, claiming with AS, claiming something's up, anti-Semitism, something's up when seeing many Jews in high positions. Why is this irrational? Because why can't it just be that those people are successful? And why can't it be that maybe they come from a culture that emphasizes success? Are we anti-Asian because Asians are relatively successful? I mean, it's completely irrational. Indians in the United States are even more successful than Jews, Indians from India. And you can see now that people hate Indians. Look at the Indian hatred that MAGA is expressing. Why? Because they're successful. They're more successful than the MAGA. MAGA are failures. Indians are successful, and they have brown skin, and that's unacceptable. So it's the same phenomenon as Jews. Why are they successful? Because they have a culture that emphasizes success, and they're envious. Ike, I'm proposing a 200-year mortgage. What do you think? Well, I mean, nobody's going to buy a 200-year mortgage. I'll talk about Trump's suggestion of a 50-year mortgage on the show tomorrow. So if you're interested in that, I'll talk about it tomorrow. Marius, to which extent do you agree with Theodor Herzl's idea of a Jewish state, and which degree do you think it's a collectivistic idea? Again, I mean, I've talked about this in the past, and I'll talk about it again in the future. I'll do a quick version. I agree with the idea that there needs to be a state for Jews. That is, a state that is dedicated for the self-defense of Jews. Jews can escape there, and since Jews will be a majority there, there will be no anti-Semitism in the state. Given the global nature of anti-Semitism and how prevalent it is and how common it is across time, someplace to protect Jews, even Jews who don't consider themselves Jews, is worthwhile having. To that extent, I agree with Herzl's state for Jews, not even Jewish state for Jews. To what degree do I don't? It's a collectivistic idea. Well, it is collectivistic because it's for Jews, but of course, that has been forced on Jews by everybody else, again, whether they accept it or not. And to the extent that it becomes Jewish, the law is Jewish in any kind of way, which is not Herzl's idea, but did develop later, that is wrong. So the laws of the state should not be Jewish. Right? John Smith says, Greek Rome, Great Britain, United States has been European dominance from the beginning. Yeah, but you skipped from Rome to Great Britain. You skipped over, 1,200 years, 1,200 years, where Central Asia, where the Middle East, where North Africa, where China and India were far more advanced than Europe. Far more advanced than Europe. So you can take the racist nonsense and find somebody else to believe in it. Let's see, Bobby. Yeah, he says it at the end of Axioms, Induction 1, first lecture of Induction in Physics and Philosophy. Okay, I'll take a look at it. Bobby Williams, my bad. It is more completely formulated an hour into the second part of this. Of what? Of induction, of the second part of his Physics and Philosophy, Induction in Physics and Philosophy. Okay. Andrew, I think it really speaks to an objective sense of life that Rand wrote in her journal that Galt was a lover of reality. Shouldn't we all experience that metaphysical feeling on a basic level? Yes. Lover of reality and lover of the human mind for being able to integrate reality and capable of achieving what we can achieve. But yes, a love of reality is a beautiful statement. And this is a sense in which I think love is far more powerful than hate. Cook, besides Constantine's Sword by James Carroll, are there any other books on the topic of anti-Semitism you'd recommend? I don't have them here. I read bits and pieces. I haven't read anything. I will, right now I'm working on this other project. At some point I'll work on an anti-Semitism project, which will involve reading books, and then I'll be able to recommend more to you. But I think there's a lot of stuff out there on anti-Semitism that is probably worth reading. Nothing that comes to mind right now. Andrew, what makes me nuts about Mark Levin is he spends half an hour outraged that Trump has the legal right to impose tariffs, while never mentioning that power is supposed to be limited to emergencies. Yeah, I mean, Matt Levin is outrageous in the sense that he will justify things that Trump is doing that deep down he knows are evil and wrong. And there are only a few issues in which he's willing to criticize Trump, Ukraine being one of them, but very few others. Nate, why do activist hedge funds like to do stock buybacks during a hostile takeover of a corporation? I don't understand any of that. Activist hedge funds, whose stock are they buying back? When you do a hostile takeover of a corporation, you're buying its stock. So I don't know who they're buying back. I don't understand stock buyback. The question doesn't make any sense to me. So maybe try to formulate it differently tomorrow, on tomorrow's show, or on a future show. But there's something that doesn't add up in that. You know, ask me a more direct question where the different components are clearer. But how a stock buyback is related to takeover, those don't go together. All right, guys, thank you. Really, really appreciate the support. I'm going to go off to dinner, and I will see you tomorrow. I think it'll be in the evening. We'll do a show tomorrow, but I will see you tomorrow, and we will talk more then about, there's a lot of stuff to talk about. A lot of stuff to talk about. Among other things, I'll talk tomorrow about the 50-year mortgage proposal, and a lot of other things. Talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.